the recording. I just realized the recording just started with me saying ding. Um, so yeah, welcome to Unit Night discussion. We are going to discuss not a lot of stuff, as you can see. Reason why it's not a lot as well. In this point in U.S. history, we're not going to have a whole lot of things to look at because most of it is going to be current events. So there's that. As you can see, there's like only 5 topics that we'll strut through. I reserved like an hour and a half for this discussion. And I fully expect that we're going to be pretty done really soon. Um, to answer your question, Rob, it will be on the lecture calendar. Those are where the recordings are going to be uploaded. Now, if it's relevant in any way, I doubt that there will be some kind of significance in certain events, current events, for the exam. You are free to use current events on other kinds of exams like AP Lang. But that's the whole point of AP Lang, is being able to use evidence from the current, era, I guess. But yeah, it is very unlikely that you will interact with a lot of elements in this unit, but it is somewhat worth knowing if, you know, maybe you want to do really well in the MCQ and there's like one section in the MCQ that might make and break your MCQ score. Then there's that argument, I guess. Even then, I don't really remember a whole lot from Unit 9 being on my exam, so it's very unlikely that it will be dramatically important. If you're wondering what the percentage weighting is 4 to 6%, so it's the same as period 1. I don't know why they suggest 8 class periods. I could probably cover in like 5 class periods or even less. Alright, so before we start, do you guys have any concerns about your knowledge of Unit 9? Because I suspect that this is going to blur the lines between discussion and lecture to some extent. How many of you are very familiar with Unit 9 or somewhat familiar with Unit 9? So with kind of the victory of the conservative movement in the 80s and then onwards. So it seems like not a lot of you are familiar with this period, and that's perfectly fine. It's okay if you are not familiar with it. I'm just doing it for completion of the entire course. So let's get started. I guess it's just going to be more of me yapping. So let's start with Reagan and conservatism, which is something that is not really easy to discuss outside here in UCLA, since we're not big fans of Reagan here. But let's discuss a bit like the conservative movement in the 80s. So to preface this, we already discussed that conservatives are going to kind of develop out of evangelicism throughout the civil rights movement, right? We'll see kind of the counter response to the civil rights movement as a whole, to the new left, for instance. And for the most part, it's going to be from religious leaders, but also it will involve some students as well. For example, we discussed the Young Americans for Freedom organization. That is a conservative organization that involves students. Ultimately, in 1980, we are going to kind of see the victory of conservatism, or the dominance of conservatism, throughout the 80s when Ronald Reagan is in. So some things to talk about why Ronald Reagan wins. We will probably not go over all this too much, by the way. Ronald Reagan will enter the political arena on the basis of Reaganomics. Basically, the conception of deregulation, and the idea of cutting taxes, the idea of kind of alleviating pressure on the richer people, because he believed that there would be a trickle-down effect, that these kind of upper classes would invest in the economy, and that kind of benefit will trickle down to the middle class for the most part. And that's what we kind of call Reaganomics, even though he was not the original, he was not the economist that came up with this concept. Um, and he believes that this is going to be a very valid response to a certain crisis, economic crisis going on in the 70s, and that's going to be stagflation, which kicks off in 1973 when OPEC uh, kind of gives us these oil embargoes, and it's going to make oil just awful. It's going to affect the supply side, which means that it's going to decrease supply actually, and that means that we're going to have higher prices uh, while we have lower real output in general. So yeah. In addition to kind of trickle down economics regarding deregulation and all that, conservatives generally not only do they support this kind of laissez faire policy, they also believe that liberal programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, etc., kind of the things that we get out of the New Deal and the Great Society, are counterproductive, as it says here. Um, Basically, they wanted to decrease government involvement. Um, they wanted to kind of give things back, give power back to the state governments. And we do have a specific term for that. I don't remember what it is quite exactly, but it doesn't really matter if you don't remember it, but understand that this was a kind of general pattern. All right. Now, regarding all this, what do you guys kind of make an assumption out of conservatives in regards to society? I already gave you guys kind of the government policies and like the economic policies, but what about like the social principles that guide conservative movements? Can you guys take a wild guess with that? This is still kind of a discussion, so I kind of want to throw these questions out there to you guys. As always, the CED is up there for to help you guys kind of uh, follow along with what we are discussing. Bless him. Yeah. No, my internet is a little bad here. If I do cut out at any point, please let me know because it seems that the internet is like fluctuating outside. Nuclear families and Christian values, yeah, pretty much. With a conservative rebound, when you say conservative rebound, are you talking with the conservative Christians? You mean? Well, yeah, conservatives are going to be very closely tied to evangelicism, aka Christians. They are going to be very focused on kind of these Christian values in society. Um, Part of that also involves gender roles as well. Um, so there's that as well. Nuclear families is also something they try to conserve, right? That's kind of where the term conservative comes from, like protecting or conserving certain values that have been like the norm throughout the 20th century. So that's where the whole modern conservative movement comes out. Um, let's see. I think the rest of these developments are not quite important. So, oh yes, we do need to mention the moral majority. I think that is worth mentioning, and we will probably mention immigration from Mexico. Oh, good question. What's the difference between conservatism and liberalism? So when we talk about political conservatism and liberalism, rather than as opposed to economic, liberalism is the idea that the government should be involved in addressing social issues, social injustice. And this is very closely associated to the civil rights movement, right? Um, Conservatism is the concept that the government should not have any kind of interference with the economy, and that traditional values, Christian values, or like traditional families or family units should be conserved. Um, so, I guess as a comparison, contrast, liberals are more in favor of government intervention in regards to society, social issues, while conservatives are more against government interference in regards to the economy and states' rights, or the powers of state governments, I should say. Um, so yeah, does that answer your question? When you think of conservatism and liberalism, the difference between them, you can actually even think about the current stances of the Democratic and the Republican Party today. Well, maybe not today, but like maybe like 2008 would be a little bit more representative than now. Actually, we're kind of in a inflection point in regards to U.S. history, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the moral majority is explicitly mentioned. So the moral majority is going to be kind of one of the strong points within the religious right. The moral majority, led under Jeremy Falwell, is going to essentially, you know, uh, do conduct very similar, not very similar, but conduct some similar ways of getting voters to turn to the conservative movement. For example, they will try to do voter drives and all that. Campaigning, they will be very involved in campaigning. Um, so yeah, that's really about it about the moral majority. If you want to talk about the moral majority, it will most likely come up as like a comparison between the roles of religion or religious organizations in politics or political participation, and you could certainly compare that to, I guess, to some extent, our Great Awakenings and all that. Mainly the Second Great Awakening and the Reform movement. Um, Very loose structure, but yeah. Um, if you don't remember the moral majority, that's all right. It was a pretty big movement in the past. Um, that's pretty much what made it really significant. Is that there was a pretty sharp and pretty significant backlash to in response to the civil rights movement, and that would be the moral majority for the most part. Not every evangelical, by the way, was like part of the moral majority. Um, it's kind of like an official like society response to counterculture in yes, yes, conservatism is going to be a response to counterculture, to the 70s, to LBJ's great. How much longer is the lecture? Probably a little less than an hour. This is going to be a combination of lecture and discussion, simply because it seems that most people aren't very familiar with this unit, and that's like completely understandable. Anyways, they mention immigration from Mexico. I suspect that this will be covered in this section here, and we'll probably talk about immigration to a little bit more extent. So for now, let's talk about the Cold War. So the Cold War officially ends in the 90s, very early 90s. That's perfectly fine. With the collapse of the USSR. So the USSR, oh, by the way, just to mention, Reagan was very anti-communist, very big on that. He actually stoked, kind of reinvigorated the arms race. He spent a lot of our money, and then when I say spent, most likely wasted, which is kind of ironic, um, given fiscal responsibility and all that jazz with the conservatives, on a lot of defensive measures such as SDI, which would be the Space Defensive Initiative, or as some people call it, Star Wars. Yeah, which I honestly, a stupid way of spending money, but that's my personal opinion. He eventually cools down his tone, uh, mainly because the USSR Premier Gorbachev is going to institute certain reform policies, but most of these are actually going to be rather too late. In fact, Gorbachev was rather a good leader at the time. He also brought he brought McDonald's and Pizza Hut to the USSR. So if you guys are willing to shitpost on that, pardon the language, then there's that to mention. Was Star Wars a bluff to the Soviets to overextend their budget? Is that correct? Um, Whether or not it was a bluff, that's certainly up to debate. A lot of people, for the most part, scholarly consensus is usually he just wanted to restart the arms race, for the Cold War, to like kind of end it like with a conclusive, I don't know, finale or fanfare with it. Um, Maybe it was a bluff. We don't really know. at least I don't really know necessarily. Um, I mean, if it was a bluff, and it certainly did get the Soviets to overextend their budget, but as far as I know, I think Reagan was just kind of being a little weird, so to speak, with the defense spending. A lot of conservatives do have a tendency to really love defense spending as a whole, so I don't think it was necessarily a bluff. I think it was just actually genuine from his end. Um, so make up make of that however you will. But let's move on to a little bit. Yeah. I guess overextension is relevant to the topic because one of the reasons why the Soviets will kind of fall apart very easily in 1991 is because of the budget thing and the arms race and kind of the economy not being great. Again, the Gorbachev reforms are in response to all that. So yeah, this historical development, that's what I wanted to mention regarding like Star Wars. I'm assuming Star Wars gets mentioned somewhere. SDI, that's Star Wars. Um, he is going to kind of bring back that anti-communist rhetoric. For example, there's this speech he does in Berlin, which is Gorbachev tear down this wall in reference to the Berlin Wall. Technically, the USSR will be done under Bush. Yes, Bush will be in office after Reagan. Well, after Clinton, but he's going to be the conservative after Reagan. Bush Senior, which is HW. But part of that kind of arms defense, all that, the arms race will kind of be a factor into that economic collapse. Actually, the collapse of the USSR is a very complicated subject. I'm not willing to touch it because I have yet to do thorough reading on it. I know this is kind of like a cop-out, but it is really complicated. Most modern history is really complicated. How do I memorize? Well, I've kind of when you speak of Iran, do you mean the Iran-Contra affair, or I don't know if that's in this unit explicitly, or the Iran hostage crisis, or the fact that we overthrew Mossadegh in Iran? Because Reagan was originally a Democrat, the hostage crisis? Not very likely. Reagan did he end up being more middle ground? No. Reagan is not going to be very middle ground guy. He's quite right leaning, he's not far right, per se, but he is squarely in the right. At least how political spectra as a whole operates. I will address memorizing later, probably either at the end or on Thursday. So yeah. What else do we need to talk about? We talked about U.S. military spending, all this, economic problems, ending the Cold War. Yeah, the economic issues throughout the USSR and I guess the Warsaw Pact as a whole will also lead to a rise in sentiment of going against communism. We already saw resistance to the Warsaw Pact before in the Hungarian Revolution in 1958, if I remember correctly, but it's going to be suppressed. The only time where we actually see progress in tearing down the Warsaw Pact or the Iron Curtain is in this era. It is very unlikely that Unit 9 will be on the FRQ section. Can I talk about the cons of Reaganomics? It didn't work. Reaganomics didn't actually have the effect. A lot of people misconstrue the idea that Reaganomics fixed stagflation. By the way, Unit 9 might appear on the SAQ, but it's an optional one. It's like the one where you pick and choose. But Reaganomics is not going to work. In fact, what it does is that it increases economic disparity. So yeah, that's the major con with Reaganomics. The main reason why trickle down is believed to work, why economic neoliberalism, as we call it, kind of works. Kind of, I put it in air quotes. um, is because they hit it rich later when they found oil deposits. If you guys do know, like, kind of the UK counterpart to Reagan, that's going to be Margaret Thatcher, which a good chunk of British people hate for justified reasons. She's one of the reasons why their kind of housing is pretty bad, and their healthcare system is also really bad, um, and why their economy is actually in shambles right now. At least historically speaking. Um, Side tangent, but um, in general, kind of being able to work up that supply side is kind of macroeconomic, but that's not something you can credit to Reaganomics. Um, so yeah. Also, I would like to know, during the Reagan administration, we had the AIDS crisis, so there's that. Um, a good question about Reaganomics, whether or not was there kind of benefits. What was the new role? The end of the Cold War, new challenges forced the nation to redefine its policy and role in the world. So after the Cold War, by the end of the Cold War, the U.S. is pretty much going to be the global power. I mentioned before in Unit 8 that the U.S. is going to be a global power. This time in Unit 9, I think it would be quite appropriate to call it the global power. We have one of the strongest militaries in the world. We had a fairly strong economy, and all that. So we kind of viewed ourselves as kind of the leader of the democratic world. And that's kind of how we currently define ourselves in terms of foreign policy. Um, Kind of the leader of the free world. Obviously, that's kind of changing in some ways. But yeah, we will be very involved in foreign policy. No longer are we going to be quite isolationist. We abandoned that a long time ago with the Cold War and World War II. Oh, not even Cold War, the World War II part. But for sure, like, if you did have any doubt regarding isolationism, I'm not sure why you would. We are for sure not isolationists at this point in time. We are like the police, I guess, the policeman of the world in some ways. At least we act like it. Whether or not we make the world better in that way, that's up to debate. As of now, I am recording, yes. Getting up in a lot of business, right? With the Oslo Accords, being very involved with Asian agreements. So yeah, we've always kind of been a little bit of a business. So let's move on from the end of the Cold War, and we need to talk about the economy. Now, I'm not a big fan of talking about the economy as much as the next person, but in this period in time, the economy is going to be changing in a very radical way, right? The digital revolution. We're going to see the rise of globalization. Whether or not that's good, that's up to your political beliefs. But we are going to see the rise of transnational corporations. For real, when, like, it's going to be very strong. We're going to see things like we're going to see a lot of corporations that will operate in various countries. Yes, we will discuss immigration in the next topic. So the digital revolution, kind of being able to communicate around the world, the internet and all this, it's all big, guys. It's all big. You guys might, like, take it for granted. Hopefully, I say this as if I don't take it for granted, and I do, because I was born into the 2000s. So, but the internet is going to be really huge in terms of global communications. It's going to make kind of global economies, or at least global reach of economies, more significant. It's going to make production international in like foreign countries more possible, and a coordination for that, right? In addition, I guess College Board wants me to yap about how telephones, or how your, like, digital phones have changed your life, or changed American lives. I'm pretty sure this is a no duh. The rise of social media is going to be very important. We got Twitter. Well, now it's called X, but yeah, Facebook, what used to be Twitter. I mean, Meta as a whole, I guess, like Instagram and all that. Social networks are going to be a little significant because this makes advertisements rather easy to do. Instead, it's going to be like right up in your face whenever you're on like social media and whatever. Every now and then you are going to get an advert, and even though you might think that, oh, I'm not going to be influenced by this, this still kind of puts something in your mind, this kind of consumer idea. Service sector is also going to be widely expanded, right? That's one of the developments. As we transition away from manufacturing, where we start to like outsource manufacturing to foreign countries that have lower wages, one of the reasons why. We kind of see the rise of service sectors, the service jobs. You know, maybe you might not be a fan of working in a restaurant, but yeah, the restaurants, we're gonna see a lot more restaurants pop up every now and then, and not just those like restaurants or coffee shops, etc., but also people working in the digital space as well, administrators and all that. Now, this topic, the last development, I already talked about economic inequality or economic disparity, wealth disparity. They attribute it to kind of nothing here, but the real wages, all that, the kind of things that are decreasing, is kind of one of the effects of Reaganomics. That's the one thing I just want to make a direct link. So while the working class and the middle class people kind of just don't have their wages met with the dynamics of the economy, the rich get richer. So that's like the whole story in terms of the economy. Now, that contributes to the real GDP of the country, but the real GDP, again, does not measure the relative wealth of a lot of people or the standard living of various classes. So if you guys are rather pissed off about, your wages as of now in terms of middle classes or, the working class, blame Reagan. At least a lot of educated people tend to blame Reagan. So there's that. Also, in this time, we also kind of see kind of the rejection of government interference, not only under Republican presidents, but as well as other Democratic presidents, such as Bill Clinton. He's going to end up repealing the Glass-Steagall Act, which was kind of a regulation of commercial bank activity in the stock market. So if you're wondering how the 2008 recession happened, it was that action that happened. Same case for the Silicon Valley Bank. There's that too. Let's see, what else do they want us to... The dot-com bubble. I don't think we need to talk a whole lot about the dot-com bubble. We already mentioned globalization as well. The digital divide... The digital divide is kind of a phenomenon in regards to politics. We're going to see increasing polarization between political parties. If you guys have seen presidential debates and political discussions from the 60s in that era, it's rather respectful, if that's one way you want to put it. As of now, you guys probably have seen the presidential debates in recent history. Those are just a side effect of the digital divide going on. We kind of get all that. Now, let's talk about immigration. We are still going to see a lot of immigration, international immigration from Asia and Latin America specifically. In addition, we are going to still see an influx of internal migration being centered in the not Rust Belt, the Sun Belt, so the American South and the West. Some African Americans throughout the 80s and the 90s are going to go back to the South for a variety of reasons. You don't need to know the exact reasons because this is not AP African American Studies. A lot of Americans are also going to move over to the West because, again, industrial centers and economic opportunities in those areas tended to be a lot stronger than, in the random of nowhere in the Midwest. So there's that pattern. But as well as economic opportunities, the rise of America as a global economy, kind of being a very strong economy, in fact, will attract a lot of immigration. So, yeah. In fact, I am a descendant of immigrants that came to America for that reason. Better economy. Uh, a side effect of all this immigration is going to be actually even more, even special, because we do see a huge influx of Asian, not just like, East Asian, but we also see South Asians as well. So Indian, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Um, we see more from China, Southeast Asia as well, Vietnam, Cambodia, Japan. As in regards to Latin America, the most significant source of immigration in Latin America, I shouldn't word it as source, but the most like country of origin is mainly going to be Cuba and Mexico throughout the 20th century as a whole. Now, what these immigrants will bring are two things: labor, menial labor. As you guys probably already know, a lot of Mexican immigrants will serve in hardworking tasks such as plumbing and all that, construction wear, all that. But another thing is culture. In regards to a gastronomic culture. For example, Latin Americans are going to bring us Tex-Mex cuisine. Asian Americans are going to bring us Asian fusion as well. So understand that that's kind of one of the things that go on. By the end of this whole immigration wave, third or fourth, I don't know where we are at right now, but we're going to kind of really solidify the whole melting pot idea of multiple ethnicities within the U.S. Responses to immigration vary. Again, Democrats tend to support immigration, while Republicans tend to want to build that wall, tend to oppose immigration. For, again, reasons on both sides vary. So, yeah. There is this model minority thing. I have a very huge issue with this term as an Asian American myself. But that is kind of the term we use for Asian Americans because they smart. They were rather successful. So yeah. Amy Tan. Oh man, I live in an era where Amy Tan and Joy Luck Club is literally on the CED. Yeah, there are a variety of issues that the immigrants will face. Amy Tan's going to be kind of the representative of the identities of Asian Americans kind of living in split worlds, quite similar to African Americans actually in regards to the color line and like the black veil. But let's move on to challenges of the 21st century. This is mainly going to be talking about the war on terror. Nope, you don't need to know most of this. In fact, you could probably just throw this out of your head right after. War on terror is something that maybe a lot of you understand, right? So I'm wondering, what do you guys particularly believe in terms of the effects of the war on terror on U.S. in terms of domestic policies? Because there are some challenges that will be brought up as a result of 9/11 stereotypes. Yes, there's that stereotyping Middle Eastern. The Patriot Act, yes. The issue of privacy. That's been an issue since Roe v. Wade, but since abortion. But the Patriot Act, or the USA Patriot Act, or Patriot USA, whatever, one of those three. Anyone else have any ideas about kind of the importance of 9/11 and the war on terror? Yes, we get DHS, a new department. NSA. Yep. So yeah, all of these things that you guys have seen, maybe with the exception of the Patriot Act, you guys have seen brought up in your lives before. For example, I'm sure you guys have gone to an airport and traveled somewhere. So the NSA is there, part of the DHS, Department of Homeland Security. DHS is also well involved with immigration as well. The Patriot Act, not so much. There was a kind of scandal regarding the collection of your data, random searches, yep, all that. So yeah. This thing just feels so American out of College Board, by the way. Um, Now, last but not least, climate change will continue to be an issue throughout. Why? Deregulation from Reagan. So we kind of saw that out of the kind of the cuts on EPA and all those Clean Air, Clean Water Acts. Climate change is going to come back as a major issue in the 21st century, and it is still a major issue in the 21st century. It's still in the debate. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about for the CED. So I guess now we're going to segue into where we are in American history in regards to the current administration that we have right now. Current administration is actually rather radical in terms of U.S. history. Um, I remember living through 2016 to 2020 and all the political debates and all that. Now, I was not really big into politics. I was not big into U.S. history in the first place. But kind of looking back in the past events throughout, it is kind of worth mentioning that all of these patterns we have observed, they are still transitioning in regards to this period. So, where we stand now with the Trump administration and whatnot, we're gonna have to see how this really has a lasting impact on, in regards to like political history or social history within the U.S. Maybe economic history, because in light of the recent tariffs, you guys probably are aware of my comparison between recent tariffs and Smoot-Hawley, which was the tariff that worsened the Great Depression. So there's all that. Um, Obviously, you guys are living in unprecedented times, but you do have a chance to kind of be one of those common people that we discussed in civil rights, the student movements. You guys do have that opportunity to make history in that regards. So there's that little speech as well as political participation. Go out and vote once you do become of age to vote. Even if any of you guys are 18, I don't know if any of you guys were 18 during the 2024 election. Some of your votes did matter. Even though 2024 felt like your vote didn't matter as a student, that's not true. Your vote does matter not only in the presidential election, but also in congressional elections and local elections. So there's all that. Of course, we do actually see quite a bit of voting from a variety of demographics, a little bit at a higher stage. So there's that interesting development. So yeah. So I'm gonna leave it off here for Unit 9. If you guys do want to chat a little bit about Unit 9 and whatnot, I'm open to that. We do have quite a lot of time left. We were supposed to end. I reserved an hour and a half. We started at 4:15, so we pretty much covered this in less than an hour. So yeah. If you guys have any questions you're curious about Unit 9, feel free to ask. But to be honest, shouldn't really be your priority. If you do have any questions about the other units, those are also within the ballpark. I guess fair game. What kind of stimulus will you be seeing for Unit 9 MCQs? That's a very good question, and I don't really have a good answer to that, mainly because I haven't seen any Unit 9 in the past exams that I've done. Past exams, yeah. But usually it tends to be non-stimulus, but if you were to see a stimulus, you would probably see something out of Reagan, a speech out of moral majority, something like that. Very likely. Reagan and the end of the Cold War are probably the most important topics out of a very non-important unit. If you put in something the wrong timeline, will they take away points? They're not there to take away points, they're there to give you points. So you might not earn a point if you make some silly thing like that, mistake like that. You still don't understand trickle down economics. Do you not understand the theory behind it? Oh, I should answer the Truman Doctrine and the Reagan Doctrine. I'm not quite familiar with your formal term in regards to the Reagan Doctrine. Let me see if it's even mentioned in the CED. I don't really see anything about the Reagan Doctrine. I don't know where you got that. It does sound familiar. I'm not surprised if there is kind of like a policy under Reagan that would be considered the Reagan Doctrine. Social movements for Unit 8. Possibly. Heimler. Uh, yeah, I'm gonna say that I'm not really familiar with this. I can only know so much as a college student for Unit 9. There was a Truman Doctrine, yes. That was basically the policy of containment, containing communism during the Cold War. And foreign policy will, for the most part, be dictated by that doctrine. How we follow that, eh. It will vary from time to time. We might have detente. We might have. There was a policy under John Foster Dulles, who was the Secretary of State, I believe, under the Eisenhower administration, which was slightly different, but it just pretty much was the same thing. Truman Doctrine is not going to lead to the Second Red Scare. It is also not going to be due to the Second Red Scare. The Second Red Scare is just a reaction to the USSR existing. So yeah. Second Red Scare will consist of McCarthyism, the Lavender Scare, HUAC, and all that. Now, as for your question over social movements on Unit 8, what particularly do you want me to discuss about in regards to what we would call the civil rights movement? Because a core part of the civil rights movement is going to be African Americans. But the civil rights movement is going to expand out to a variety of groups, such as the LGBTQ plus community, the women's rights group, or the feminist group. We will say the second wave of feminism during the civil rights movement, to Native Americans, or we call as Red Power. Some people call it Red Power. Asian Americans, I might have mentioned the Chicano movement as well, will come out. The first Red Scare is not going to be due to the Nazis. This first Red Scare is during World War I, in response to the Russian Revolution. And that will lead to the detainment of socialist leaders such as Eugene Debs, the attempted deportation of certain immigrants. Both involve Russia, yes. Women mainly. Oh, okay. So in regards to women's role, for example, women from every kind of movement, such as the LGBTQ plus. Not great that I started off with that. But also as well as the African American movement, the Asian American movement. Women will be very important in organizing. But as well as in regards to feminism, the kind of idea that of my body, my rights and all that, abortion, will be all brought up. The role of women will also bring in the debates over equal pay as well. So yeah. Yes. Well, yes, the third Red Scare is going to be mainly focused on the potential for a communist revolution. Second Red Scare is mainly concerned with whether or not someone was a communist spy ratting out to the USSR. Economic and social policy of presidents from Reagan to Bush. So Reagan and Bush are very similar in terms of economic policies. They both favored deregulation of the industries, and they both favored tax cuts. When you say W. Bush, I'm assuming the one that kind of did the whole war on terror thing. Both Bushes are going to be very similar. In regards to Bill Clinton, he's also, strangely enough, going to pass the Omnibus Act and which repeals Glass-Steagall, which is a form of deregulation. So that's an interesting thing. But in regards to social movements, Reagan was very against LGBTQ people. He would kind of railed against the LGBTQ or the trans community um, throughout the AIDS crisis. Clinton's gonna be fairly moderate on that. He doesn't really do much for social policies or anything like that. I guess he will care more about Medicare and Medicaid in some ways. Reagan never ends up destroying all those, nor do the Bushes. They actually keep those around. Um, in regards to social policies regarding the W. Bush administration, you might want to bring up the issue of privacy in regards to the government's role in your data. So there's that. Ugh. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to know because it's like I haven't done thorough research into it in full admittance. um, I'm not really big into politics again, I should mention. I just vote, though. Well, you have to remember, well, you should probably know what the Reconstruction Amendments did. You should know, like, what the 17th, 18th, 19th, and the 21st did. You should have a general idea. If you get the amendment number wrong, I'm not quite sure if they will really read too much into it. That's a good question. You're gonna have to ask an AP grader if you know of one. Someone who AP grades A push. I don't know anyone who does that, so eh. You have to be an AP teacher and you have to kind of be invited, as far as I remember. I think you're invited to AP grade, I think. And then once you do it, you're kind of like there. Well, that's one of the polls I released in A Push. Some of you guys said you were fine with it. Let me check the status of that poll. It is somewhere up there. Oh God, y'all are. I'm gonna have to look for a poll in A Push. Nope. Give me a second. I'm checking up the status of that. So it seems that a lot of you guys wanted me to do an AP debrief. So there's that. So I will probably go over the past FRQs. I believe some teachers have the choice to grade from home, but most of the conferences are like, they vary. Like they're in random places. Like some of them are in Kansas, some of them are in Ohio, some of them are in Florida. I know AP World I think is in Kansas. I don't know where A Push is. They have like these entire places like set for for each subject. Hmm. Yeah, some AP graders have the choice to do from home. All right. Any other questions or things you want me to discuss or yap about? You have forgotten everything from Unit 6. That will be the Gilded Age. Complexity point. All right. Advice on like if we don't know something. Actually, I might move my office hours to the morning. Probably, I might change my office hours. Um, yeah, Heimler will discuss a little bit on how you can get the complexity point. Unit 6, it's a little tough to do a general overview on Unit 6. Unit 6, you should be looking at how the rise of industrial capitalism, labor unions, reform groups, um, the role of government as well. Those are it. I guess I don't need to do office hours at all, but. Hmm. Nah, I might do office hours tomorrow instead. Advice on like if we don't know specific, what should we do? If you don't know anything specific, um, try to describe a development. Try to describe it and then explain it. If you don't know any specific illustrative examples, that's all right. Um, if you are able to describe kind of a development that is correct, like factually correct, and we know, kind of you know like what development is in the CD, you have an idea, but you're just like blinking on it. That will be worth something instead of just doing nothing, right? Doing something is always better than doing nothing on the AP exam. That's it. The odds of getting complexity are very they're very unlikely, but I will talk about some ways that some things I've done in order to get a complexity point in my classes. I've gotten a lot of I've gotten like out of all the DBQs I've done, I think I've only missed out the complexity point in 2 essays. So, who were the two Italian men who killed an FBI in the sentence? Um, Very good question. Well, it's a very oddly specific question. I don't remember it off the top of my mind. Well, there you go. Feel like force sourcing is not that hard. Force sourcing is on the way. The thing is like it's not a be all end all. Like using all 7 documents plainly, or just sourcing 4 documents, is not really like a be all end all. It's like a melange of it. So if you end up using all 7 documents and you end up sourcing like 3 things and you use quite a lot of, if you use like 2 to 3 pieces of EBD and you are like really making sure that the sources are in dialogue with each other and constructing your argument, that is one way to get a nuanced argument. Using HIP over and over or just using all the sources, it doesn't really construct an entire nuanced argument. It just makes your analysis a little more long. So you kind of have to do it right. I believe you need 5 pieces of documents now, or 4. 5 or 6. It used to be 6. I don't know if it's still 6. You need 4. There we go. They made it significantly easier for you guys, I guess, to get those 2 points. Don't forget, in order to get the second point, you have to use it to argue. You have to argue the document. Yeah, that is it. Wait, is your outside evidence? As long as your evidence is not in the documents, it's considered outside evidence. And it can be outside, and all that. You don't need to know exactly what the antebellum presidents did, mainly because they didn't really do much. Um, if you want me to yap about some of them, I mean, James Buchanan did nothing. Franklin Pierce was just absolutely horrible as a person. Um, I think the only ones you really have to know is just Polk. Polk is going to be well involved in Manifest Destiny, but that's about it. Um, yeah. Millard Fillmore does nothing as well. Do I know all the presidents? I don't know what every single one of them did. Um, Nor I don't think I could even like list them in chronological order. I could try for fun. Um, eh, it's not really something worth doing. Um, the main presidents you should really know are Washington, John Adams, Jefferson, um, I guess technically Monroe for the Monroe Doctrine, um, Jackson, Polk, um, Lincoln for sure. Not exactly Andrew Johnson. He was kind of a piece of crap. Um, after that, I guess Teddy Roosevelt, um, and then FDR, and then Truman, and then JFK is not really the most important president. Sorry, JFK fans. LBJ is going to be more significant, in my opinion, and Reagan. Um, I mean, I don't think it's used for consideration for EBD. If in the current rubric, if you check, it might say that too. So I guess if it says what it says, then follow that. Um, Lavender Scare was kind of, yeah, it was people being scared of gay people, of the LGBTQ community, due to the belief that they were more likely to be communists. I don't know. The reasoning behind it is like always stupid. Um, yeah, yeah, they are pretty well linked. Um, why? People were just horrible. People are still horrible. Um, just tends to be a pattern, I guess. Um, will I do tips on MCQ? Um, I might. I might try to do the entirety of the exam formatting. So MCQ, SAQ, DBQ, LEQ. And I will also try to go over mental tips, but I do want to leave enough space for some last minute office hours because I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing office hours at 9 p.m. tonight. I might move them to tomorrow in the morning, but the thing is, if it's in the morning, most of you guys are probably not going to be there. Um, so, yeah, school. That's the issue. My schedule is a little off. Um, the thing is that I could push it back more because the reason why is I have a meeting here. I didn't know that. So it would have to be pushed back to 10 to 11 p.m. And that's really late. I don't want to keep anyone up at 1 a.m. On our eastern side. Um, so yeah. We'll see how things are. So there's all that. I guess we don't. You guys want to go through an MCQ or an LEQ? Someone asked if we can do an MCQ together. Do you want to do it now or do you want to do it on exam tips? Because that's what I was going to do for exam tips. Um, exam tips on Thursday. Exam tips will be 4:15 PST. Not AM, PM. Yes, same time as today. We will go through MCQs together. We will go through some SAQs, and we will go over some methods, practice some methods for the DBQ and the LEQ. So yeah. What is ACT UP? Oh, okay. Interesting. I didn't know about that ACT UP. Well, you're just gonna have to pull through. I know it sucks. Mm. A lot of these exams are tiring, which is why, like, when you do final exams in college, it's like finals week and you don't have class. Like, thank God. But when you have back to back ones, that's just where you want to die inside. There's no class day of the week of finals. That's usually how they do the stuff. I mean, any class that has like anything for like during the week of finals, like pure evil. So most of the time, things when the only class type of class that meets up are like seminars or colloquiums, um, which are like zero stress classes. You just go there and vibe. So yeah. Any more questions about APUSH? We will go over exam tips in more detail, by the way. So for those of you who are missing Unit 8 and Unit 9, do you think you have any more questions about Unit 8 and Unit 9? The DPQ and the LEQ are going to be grouped in the same section. Unit 8 is 1945 to 1980. Major ideas are, the Cold War as a whole. What are our foreign policies? What do we follow through in regards to foreign policies? What we do in response to, the spread of communism throughout the world. That's the whole Cold War thing. In regards to home, you need to understand like the civil rights movement. So if anything dumbed down to two things, it's the Cold War and the civil rights movement. World War II is in Unit 7. And I would say no, I don't think World War II is the most important. The New Deal is probably the most important. Either that or the progressives. New Deal is very important. There's a reason why a lot of historians should know FDR when they study U.S. history. I mean, he's big. So New Deal did pass a certain legislation to alleviate issues of the Great Depression. It did not cure the Great Depression, by the way. Several of these are going to make the federal government very well involved in the Great Depression, mainly because, the whole voluntarist response, or let it fix out on its own, or let it buff out on its own, was not a good strategy adopted by the Hoover administration. Yes, the federal government's going to be more involved with the economy, right? There's going to be passage of significant legislation, social legislation, such as, not social legislation, but legislation for social benefits, like Social Security as well. And a good chunk of these are, a good chunk of the New Deal reforms are still with us. For example, Social Security is still with us. CEC is still with us. SEC is still with us, too. So, yeah. Well, current debates now for Unit 9, I didn't want to mention, is like healthcare, Social Security, and all that. So a good chunk of these are still in debate today. As regards to the New Deal and its sequel, better sequel, by the way, the Great Society. So yeah. Anything else? Which was more impactful, Great Society or New Deal? I would say that the Great Society is more effective, more impactful, mainly because Great Society addressed a variety of things. It was meant to address poverty in a time of affluence among the middle class. It was meant to address racial issues, social injustices, basically expanding kind of these benefits from the New Deal to specifically African Americans. In addition, Great Society, the scope of Great Society still remains a law very strongly with some of our stuff. In regards to Medicare and Medicaid, a lot of people do benefit Medicare and Medicaid. What time period was it again? Great Society was during the LBJ administration, so in the 60s, early 70s, Unit 8. All right. Anything else? If not, we can end it a little early, and I might have time to pick up lunch. Or dinner, I guess. Sandwich? No, I think I ordered Italian. Mainly pasta. Alright. Looks like we seem good. So one last question, a little bit of a poll here. Before I ask for feedback, I guess. Would you guys rather have my office hours be pushed back to 10 p.m. Tonight, or have a morning or late night office hours tomorrow? Office hours tomorrow during the night would be a little bit earlier, around 9:30 p.m. But that would be 12:30 in the midnight. You'd rather have morning? How early in the morning? I was thinking of, okay, so as of now, this is what we had planned, but I think very likely it might not happen. I might have to push it back to like 10 to 11, or I guess 9:45 to 10:45. Or I could move it to, because I usually skip lectures for my math 35. We could do office hours at this point here, and we can do office hours after music ensemble here, 9:30 to 10:30. Let's not do 1 a.m. Okay. You guys think 9:30 to 10:30 would be all right? This is in PST, yes. Oh yeah, it was Cinco de Mayo yesterday. We are gonna, strangely enough, we're gonna have Victory Day on Thursday, so that's an interesting thing. Okay, 9:30 to 10:30 p.m. it is. So booked and busy. Yup. Some of these things I don't go to. I don't go to. Balmer doesn't have his office hours today. On Friday. Nor does Brea. Alright. So yeah. As for the debrief might likely be around, I don't know, in this area. In fact, let me schedule it for 5. A bush debrief. This will probably be around 2 hours, maybe even more, 2.5 hours. It's going to be like a little discussion. I hope that doesn't interfere with anything. It shouldn't, because I have my midterm later. Alright, that's where my debrief will be on Monday. It's likely not going to be on Sunday because I don't know if College Board's going to release it by Sunday. Who knows? College Board tends to be unpredictable sometimes, so yeah. Can I move it to Tuesday evening? Possibly. There might be a meeting though. So as of now, it's going to be there. Pre-calc is Tuesday. Not really. I'm kind of ambivalent to that. Let's see, I might be able to do. No, I'm not probably not going to do a physics office hours. All right, that's settled then. Anything else for you guys? What time? The debrief is going to be 5 p.m. Pacific. 9:30 Pacific tomorrow will be our office hours. Yes. So 12:30, which is a little bit better than 1 a.m. How much better? Not too much better, but I don't really have a choice. Cool. All right. Okay. I guess we can think about ending it early here. Unless you guys have any last minute questions. If not, you can stay up late on Wednesday. If you want office hours. And if you're not willing to stay up, I will have some office hours on Thursday as well. Right after the exam tips. I'll try to go through that as fast as I can. Cool. Alright, I'm going to end the recording here. I'll see you, if not tomorrow, then Thursday. And we'll go over the exam tips.